All right, so our mission, the Stanislaus County Agricultural Commissioner / Stiller is responsible for the implementation of laws and regulations designed to support and protect the well-being of agriculture, business, and the community. All right, so what's the definition or the difference between an investigation and a complaint? Does anybody know? Anybody? Yes, that is correct. So some of our investigations start off as a complaint. That means someone called into the office and said, hey, something's not right, I need you to check into it. But the real difference is an investigation is a response to a pesticide incident. The incident can be a human effect, environmental effect, or an economic loss. A response to a non-compliance found at a time of inspection. So if you get a violation on one of your inspections with us, it launches an investigation because it means that we need to check into something and see how it happened and how we can prevent it from happening in the future. A complaint is a notification or report of alleged misuse of pesticides, pesticide exposure including odor, or pesticide injury to crops, property, humans, animals, or the environment. So he said earlier that we get them as complaints, but does anybody know how we receive complaints or investigations? Does anybody want to answer that question? How do you think I find out that someone's misused something? Oh, it looks like I have a taker. Hold on, she's going to give you the mic so we can hear your answer.
I believe it's just a phone call, right? I mean, there's anonymous phone calls, I believe. They can happen.
It is. It's anonymous phone calls. It's employees sometimes that have recently been let go. But how many of you guys are big fans of social media? Twitter, TikTok, Facebook? Woo woo. No? No takers. Okay. Tough crowd. Social media is becoming a big thing. So what happens is you have a concerned parent at a school, they're posting it on Facebook, somebody in the community contacts us and says, hey, there's this Facebook page, can you check it out? We check into it, and then we see, oh yeah, they're saying someone drifted near a school. So we're gonna be checking into it. So it can happen with social media. So this is the list that we usually receive our investigations by. So we get pesticide illness reports. Does anybody know what a pesticide illness report is? Any takers? You know what? This guy with the black hat, he looks like he might know the answer. Kelly, can you go to the guy in the black hat right here? Nope, 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 nope. Yep, he's touching his hat. Right here. Perfect. Thank you.
What was the question again?
What is a pesticide incident report, or a PIR?
That would technically be the result of the doctor's report
Ding,
after
ding,
the employee
ding.
goes in.
We have a winner. A pesticide incident report comes from a doctor. If someone goes to the hospital and there's any suspicion that it has to do with pesticides, they are required by law to submit it to the state. It therefore gets to us, and we get the lucky opportunity to investigate it and figure out what happened. That's also the doctor's first report of occupation injury or illness. And then we already talked about citizen or employee complaints of human exposure or unsafe conditions. Those can be online, phone, or in person. Other government agency referrals. So the EPA will sometimes call us and say, hey, we tested some produce in Stanislaus County. It's over tolerance. We need you to check into it. Pest control businesses, growers, and labor contractors. Reports of loss, non-performance, or damage. A news media account, or by observation during an inspection. All right, so types of investigations or complaints. We have human effect episodes, employee citizen complaints, environmental effects incidents, property damage or loss, drift or offsite movement, and priority episode investigations. So like I said, I love to participate. So I have a poll question for you guys. How do notifications of pesticide incidents happen? A, phone call to the Ag Commissioner's office. B, incident illness report, or a PIR. C, news media account. Or D, all of the above. Does anybody want to raise their hand? Oh, I have a lucky one right here.
D, all the above.
That is correct. We can find out all of the above. I like to tell you guys that all eyes are on us because all eyes are on us. You don't think about it when you're doing your job from a day-to-day task, but a lot of people are wondering what we're doing, how we're doing it, where we're doing it, and what we're doing it with. So it's very wise, especially as a grower, to know that the community is watching you, just as much as an ag inspector is watching you, and to make sure that you're doing everything by the book and to ask questions if you don't understand something. So human health effects. The primary objective is to document the exposure and determine the circumstances, including any violations contributing to the exposure event, to evaluate the effectiveness of the label directions, laws, regulations, policies, and practices. The specific information needed. So activity, we need to know or identify what the exposed person's specific activity was. Were they harvesting grapes, aerial applications, was during the exposure event, and find out the length of time of exposure and the person's work history. So we need to know what they were doing that week before they got exposed. So that way, if we do sample, we know that, if they get a positive result for something, that they were only applying that on Wednesday. They weren't doing it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So it kind of limits our time frame of when it actually happened and when that exposure occurred. Toxic agent, we need to confirm and specify what chemicals were being used, record the full product name and EPA number, what was the intended use of the product and how was it being used, and then collect pictures of the label used and obtain labeling, if possible, from the incident site. This is because we actually do review those labels to make sure that they made sense, that you guys were applying it accordingly, and that if there's anything that we need guidance on, we can go to CDPR or EPA and say, hey, that didn't make sense to us. Can you explain it a little bit better? Exposure, what happened, were the environmental conditions? Was the person trained? Is there any other way the person could have been exposed? How is the pesticide used, handled, stored, and accessed by the injured party? So what we're typically looking for there is how did they get access to it? What were they doing with it? And what could have been done to prevent it from happening? So as an inspector, what we do is we look at pesticide application site history. We collect a pesticide application history of at least 30 days prior to the date of exposure. If nothing was applied, then must provide the information for the last pesticide application made. So those are your PURs. That's that history that I'm talking about. Why has this come up a lot, especially in investigations? When we do bee kills, we have to do a mile radius. We make our phone calls and we ask, have you did any applications? No, we didn't do any applications. We don't know what's going on with that bee kill, nothing, right? And then we check your guys' PURs, there's nothing there, so we're like, okay, well, something happened, these bees are, sick. How do we figure out who was doing what? Because everybody's saying no. Well, that's when we start pulling your guys' records. We have the ability to go to your PCAs and your dealerships and ask them for your purchase history, for their recommendations, to see if they made any recent recommendations to you, and to check what products you guys are using. So it is very important when we are asking you guys questions to just be upfront and honest and say, hey, yeah, we did an application last night at 8 o'clock with an air blast and we were using this insecticide, because eventually we're going to find out. Cultural practices, irrigation methods, cleaning fields, weedy fields, etc., training. We want to know what you're doing with your employees, so we're going to ask for those training records. We want to know when they were trained last, how they were trained, what materials you were using. We want to make sure it's been signed off, that they are saying that they actually got trained, that it's not just being stated. Information collected by the inspector continued. We're going to ask you about your supervision level, because we want to know, most labels will say that the certified applicator has to know the conditions that were present at the site. When we're asking you guys, like, what was the wind condition? Where was it coming from? How fast was it? Was there anybody along the fence line? Did you see the bikes on the road? We expect the certified applicator to be supervising them and to know these answers. So we will ask you about that information when we're doing an investigation to see were you guys really actively supervising them and making sure that they were doing everything accordingly. The symptoms, we're going to interview the injured party and ask what symptoms they experienced, when the symptoms came on, how was the person feeling prior to the exposure? Maybe did they have a head cold and it just got a little worse and there's just a little scare that they've been exposed. What is the golden rule when it comes to medical care and an employee comes to you and says, I'm not feeling good? What should you guys do? That is correct. Can you say it a little bit louder? That is correct. You are required as the employer to immediately take them to a physician. However, we do know that people will say, no, I do not want to go to the doctor. Have that documented that you wanted to and try to attempt to take them to the doctor and they refused. All right, more information continued. These investigations can be really long. I think we're 22 to 30 pages now is our minimum maximum. So we do ask a lot of questions, but it's not because we want to be a pet peeve, it's because we need it for our investigative report. So we're gonna ask you about the application method and application equipment. What equipment were you using? Was it an air blast? Was it below behind? Protective measures, did you provide the PPE? Was it in good condition? Was it broken? Was their Tyvek ripped? Do they have a history of wearing their PPE, or do you give it to them and they have a tendency of not wearing it? Those are stuff and facts that we need to know when we're going into our investigations. Decontamination, did they have access to everything that's required per the decontamination facility? It looks like I have a question. They do not have to be on site. However, I want to make it clear, please read your label, because there are certain labels, aka Gramoxone SL 3.0, that say that you do have to be actively present at the site and know what's going on. But you do not. You have phone call communication, you can text, you should just be communicating with them. When I go out there and do an inspection or an investigation and ask them, when's the last time you talked to your supervisor? And they say, oh, we haven't talked to him since last night when he gave us the assignment. That's not a good answer. We don't want to hear that. We want to know that you guys are checking on them and making sure that everything's going smoothly on your site. Others involved, was any public members involved? Was anybody on the road? Hazard communication, did employees know about this and have access to it? Does anybody know what I mean when I say hazard communication? Because I feel like I get a lot of questions about that when I do headquarters. You know, that lady has a really nice vest on. I love your vest. What's hazard communication mean?
We have a place where I post what we have sprayed, when we put it on, and what the reentry time is, and they know to look in that area.
That is correct. So hazard communication, when I'm asking you guys that during an investigation, I want to know that you have it posted where they can go to seek medical attention if there is an exposure. And I also want to check to see that they have access to their records. Your records, which are your spray records, their records, which are their training records. And then I also want to know that they have access to the application information display, like she said, where they can check that field was treated here with this, and these are the safety data sheets to tell you if you were exposed, what you should expect. All right. Notification, did you tell them that there was going to be an application occurring and to stay out of the area? Application information display, we kind of already touched on that, so I'm going to skip it. Now I have another exciting moment. Poll question number 2. If there are reasonable grounds to suspect the employee has a pesticide-related illness, the employer shall A, send the employee home, B, put them to work, C, take them to a physician immediately, or D, do nothing. All right, oh, it looks like I have someone in the back.
Letter C.
That is correct. You should take them immediately to the doctor. However, if they deny it, what do we need to do? Yes, document, document, document. It is your friend. It is our friend. Just make sure you have it in writing. All right, employee citizen complaints. This is the fun one that everybody loves and enjoys. All right, citizen complaint. So what does that look like? An individual should fill out and sign the complaint of human exposure or an unsafe condition. AKA, they're going to call us and say, hey, there's something going on. It smells out here. It's causing me to have a headache. I haven't been feeling good. I haven't felt right. Or they're going to say, I believe my property was drifted on. I saw them doing applications last night. I heard the equipment in the fields. I want you to check it out because I think that my fence line may have gotten touched, or in the backyard, maybe something got sprayed. And then, like I said, the illness, they're going to say that maybe they got a headache from it and they want to know what was sprayed. There's always a start out with how it goes is, I just want to know what was sprayed. And then it kind of goes a little bit further once we find that out. An employee complaint. So an employee has the right to file a confidential complaint alleging unsafe work conditions. It may be formal or informal. Formal complaints must be investigated as soon as possible, but no later than 3 working days if a serious violation is alleged, or 14 days for other complaints. The things that I want you guys to consider is there evidence to support the allegation? Is the hazard ongoing? Are protective devices available to control employee exposure? Did any violations occur? Should other agencies be involved in conflicting information? So what happens a lot with these employee complaints is we do get a lot of conflicting information. We go to the person that's actually the employer. We ask them for their facts. We go in and interview the employee and get their facts. But when we're writing our reports, we notice there's quite a difference in conflict of when it happened, where it happened, how often it happens. When that happens, you're probably going to get a call from us. We're going to do a headquarter records inspection because we want to see everything documented and see that everything is there like it's being stated as being there. We'll oftentimes look at your purchase history, recommendations and invoices, just to make sure that if you say that these are your spray records, that they're actually matching up, that nothing's really truly missing. All right, so environmental effects incidents. Does anybody know what an environmental effect incident is? I see a lovely guy in a green vest. I love your vest. Yeah, I think that vest is really awesome. But Cody's going to bring you the mic. I want to know, what do you think an environmental effect incident is?
Runoff into a stream, reservoir, lake, something along those lines?
Yep, that is exactly it. It's pretty plain and straightforward. These are our environmental effects incidents. All right, so we have illegal residue detection on produce or crops, fish and wildlife effects, emergency hazardous materials incidents, property damage or loss, or drift or off-site movement. Those are all considered environmental effects incidents. So we're going to talk really quickly about illegal residue detection on produce or crop. These usually get notified from California Department of Pesticide Enforcement Branch. They will contact us via email and say, hey, that produce from one of your growers came in, we tested it, it's over tolerance, and we need you to go out and confiscate the product and run a sample to see if something did get sprayed on it that shouldn't have, or check their records to see if it was sprayed too many times against label. So that's pretty much what we do with those. They're not very common, and they're very far and few between, but there are categories that I will go over. So the categories of illegal residue, there's an overtolerance. It's caused by a violation of the pre-harvest interval. You use it at too high a rate or too frequently, or other label violations. And then there's a no tolerance established, which is caused by use of pesticides not registered for that commodity. And that usually happens due to drift or spray rig contamination or violation of a plant back restriction. And then there's fish and wildlife effects. So this requires determination of the circumstances of what or who is responsible for a fish or animal kill. The things to be considered are what kind of wildlife or fish are involved, how many are affected, what the causative agent or condition was, and how and when was the pesticide introduced. Emergency hazardous material incidents. We've had a couple of those. I'm from a different county, so I've been in Tulare County, that's my home county. I went to Madera County, and now I'm in Stanislaus County. The only emergency hazardous material incident we had in Tulare County was we had a vehicle overturn on the freeway, and all of their load ended up on the highway. So they're not very common. It often involves responses from multiple agencies. You do not leave the hazardous area unattended under any circumstance. And then you only want authorized people around. You get everybody out. If someone's already in that situation, you don't remove them unless you can do so safely. Property damage or loss. So this is a major one that we deal with every year. So the most common incidents of property damage or loss are drift of herbicides, contamination of a commodity with unregistered pesticides, poisoning of domestic animals, or bee kills. All right, so before I get to the next slide, does anybody know the definition of drift?
Overspray, when the drift is not the drift goes elsewhere other than it's supposed to be.
That is correct. Thank you. So the definition of drift, at least the formal definition of drift, is pesticide movement through the air that is not deposited in the target area at the time of application. It does not include the movement of pesticide and associated degradation of compounds off the target area after the application, i.e. translocation, volatilization, evaporation. It also does not include the movement of pesticide dust or pesticide residues on soil particles that are wind-blown off the site after the application. Substantial drift is the quantity of pesticide outside of the area treated is greater than that which would have resulted had the applicator used due care. Due care, the degree of care a prudent and competent person engaged in the same line of business or endeavor would exercise under the same or similar circumstances. So, if anybody's been through a drift case, which hopefully nobody has, what do you think we start to look at or look for when we get a drift case? Does anybody have any suggestions or ideas what the inspector is going to start to look at?
Wind and weather reports. See how windy it was.
Yes, that is the number one thing we're going to look at. We're going to look at the weather reports. We're also going to call you and ask you, what was the condition like at the field that night? Anybody else have any suggestions of what we're going to look for when we're doing drift?
If there's residue off-site.
That is correct. So what we're going to do is the following. All right, things inspectors are looking for on drift cases. Did the applicator violate any laws and regulations? What were the conditions at the application site? Was the applicator demonstrating due care? What decision did the applicator make? What actions were taken by the applicator after the application occurred? Are samples needed to be taken at this time to prove if drift occurred or not? If the applicator is unknown, then we do a 1 mile radius where we make our phone calls. California Code of Regulations, Title 3, Section 6614, places responsibility on the applicator prior to the application to evaluate the surrounding properties and conditions and to determine the likelihood of harm or damage to decide whether the application should be made or not. So we're going to ask you guys if we can come out and we're going to interview the applicator because we want to see what they saw, hear what they heard, and know what they did. So that is a part of a drift investigation, is interviewing that applicator. Now, I kind of gave away my trick, but I have another bonus round. So what categories of illegal residue are there? A, over tolerance, B, under tolerance, C, no tolerance established, or D, both A and C? I hear answers. Can we get someone on a mic? Cody? Who's brave enough?
D.
That is correct. All right. So now we're going to move on to the purpose and goals of collecting samples, which is when we go CSI out in the field. It's the exciting moment. I'm going to let Judith take over, and if you have any questions, we'll address all the questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Claudia. I just want to know from the crowd, do you guys think Claudia likes best? I think she's trying to make a point to someone in the audience about maybe, getting like a nice little Christmas gift in the shape of a Stanislaus County vest. So anyway, I'm very happy to see everybody, getting answers from the crowd. That's perfect. So I am Judith Arroyo, and I oversee the program, Pesticide Use Enforcement. And I wanted to do part of this presentation as well. At the end of the day, I am the one person that, passes this investigation, all the report, all the evidence collected to Linda to review and consider if there's any enforcement needed, and if so, at what level. So I'm going to take over right here when it talks about purpose of goals and collecting samples. So in my experience, we get a lot of different stories when we interview people because there's always a vantage point of perspective of what really happened. There's also times where information is missing, and so samples give us physical evidence to be able to determine what may have occurred. So these samples are collected, again, to provide physical evidence of the presence of pesticides, assess the nature and degree of exposure, determine if violations of pesticides, of laws and regulations have occurred, and also guide mitigation strategies. I want to say that we do get calls from residents from time to time, and they want to know, I want to know what pesticides are sprayed in my area. So all of the sampling and all of the tools that we have as local ag inspectors and local ag enforcement is related to a single case or an acute, incident, one incident. We do not do like in general sampling. So all of the sampling that we do has to be related to some type of enforcement. We can try our best to determine. Sometimes we're able to determine key information, even though we didn't have all of the correct information to get go, because we are able to get reports. We're able to get a couple of other tools to make a determination. Again, with all these samples, the goal is to prove or disprove an element of a violation or to establish the cause of a pesticide-related incident. We take samples based on what the alleged violations are trying to prove or disprove, or to gather information on what did occur. So, once we kind of have an idea that, someone calls and complains about a drift, we ask them, well, where were you when you observed it? What did you observe? And, at that area, how often are you at that area? What kind of area is it? It definitely makes a difference to know if it's somewhere where it's definitely like, the front of your house, or, is it like just back way in an abandoned corner in the property? Okay, so the type of samplings that we do is, one of them is total residue. This is used to determine the presence of pesticides and the amount detected. Surface swab, used to detect pesticide contamination or drift onto such surfaces such as cars or windows. Dislodgeable foliage, collected to determine the amount of residue pesticides on foliage surfaces. And these are mainly for field worker exposure. And we actually do not do these, but DPR has been doing them. And they have recently done some, I think, in the county as well. Also, we have the ability to take volume samples used to test for pesticides in the air and the water. Haven't had to do that as much. Again, some of these that are more like environmental information samples are usually collected by DPR. If we do have to do them, we would definitely need their assistance. So sample collection units, we can have a simple sample, which provides separate results from an individual sample site. Duplicate samples. These are collected under identical conditions when the affected party requests samples. So should you ever be in, we have to call you, we have to let you know, hey, there was a complaint, would you agree to allow us to collect samples? If you want us to take duplicate samples, that would be the time for you to let us know. And so we still have to maintain custody of all the samples until they get to the lab where they're going to be analyzed. Our samples get analyzed at the, either the Anaheim lab or the Sacramento lab from CDFA, California Department of Food and Ag. They are the ones that do the sample analysis for us. There's also composite samples, which is 2 or more subsamples of equal size that are combined to represent a field or site. And split samples, which are created by dividing one sample into 2 equal and identical portions for the purpose of repeating or verifying tests. So this is a diagram showing what our typical sampling looks like when it's a field that we are collecting from. Someone says, hey, my neighbor contaminated my crop. And so we have a way of collecting, ideally 5 different samples, one in a location where we suspect no effects, all the way, moving up into the treated field. And we also can collect at times where, we definitely witness like damage to a crop, but we may not know where it's from. We also have what is called a grid sampling, which we can take up to 9 different points within the field, and then outside, and determine out of all those samples which direction it may have come from. Okay, when can samples be taken? Again, I just want to reiterate, because this is something that we've been getting a lot of requests to just take samples, go out and take samples. And We only take samples after we receive notification of a potential incident that is, potentially gonna need to be evaluated for enforcement. We consult with California Department of Pesticide Regulation, and we propose a plan. We say, here's what happened, here's what we think would meet the requirements, and they let us know yes, or they, adjust the plan. At times, they also talk with the lab because they also don't know some of the information. Recently, we had a material that we had to test for, and the current standard was not available, and the lab had to spend a little bit more time to get that made. And so they let us know, hey, that standard is not available. It's going to take a little bit longer to analyze those samples because they had to start from scratch. Once we do collect them from the field, we have our evidence locker, and we store them there under key, and we don't take them out unless we have to prepare them or we have to ship them, get them ready for shipping. At times, we have to use shipping company to transport them to the lab. Other times, and depending on the situation, we're able to actually drive them to Sacramento. Okay, so we do have one set of criteria for what is considered a priority investigation. When it's a priority investigation, we are required to let DPR know right away because DPR has to notify federal EPA. That is an agreement that they have. So some of the criteria that apply to call an incident a priority investigation include 5 or more injured people per single episode. There's also the category related to property damage, and that is either 20% of the crop yield or $20,000. Environmental effects, we're looking at the death of non-target fish, 500, non-target birds, 50, and death of an endangered or threatened species. Contamination of water, 10 or more households is something that would deem a priority investigation. And in the case of property, we have had a couple of priority bee kills in the last year and a half. Definitely the loss was more than 20,000, so we had to notify DPR so they could notify EPA. We are required also to report weekly when it's an actual priority case related to an injury of 5 or more people. We kind of have to let them know what our progress is with that investigation, just so that they know we're moving along at the right pace. What makes an investigation a priority investigation? A, death. B, death of over 200 fish. C, property loss or 15,000 or 15% crop yield loss. Or D, up to inspector's discretion. Okay, any takers? No, because I didn't go over the answer, right? I just realized that would be an actual death of a person would be what would be there. So I missed that part. Okay, so nobody qualified on that one, but everybody's a winner because I see everybody's learning things today. Okay, going back to conducting witness interviews. When we're conducting witness interviews, the purpose is to gather evidence related to the incident. We generally allow the interviewee to tell the story. We also, once they're telling us kind of like in their own words what happened or how, when they were applying, it led to an injury or what they witnessed, as they were maybe driving their vehicle and they were drifted on. Then we start going into a little bit more specific questions because we need to make sure that we are able to answer, 5 or 6 questions. These are called the 5 whys, which is what happened, where did it happen, when did it happen, who did it, and why did it happen. The other one would be how did it happen, right? Because a lot of the times through that interview, generally the person has an idea of what they think happened overall. Okay, so who should be interviewed? Should we need to interview people? We're gonna, either contact them directly for the interview. At times, we have to ask for permission from the employer when that, there's like an employee that needs to be interviewed. So individuals directly involved in the incident. And during the interviews, we want to be present with the interviewee only and an interpretive translator if needed to ensure that we are getting an accurate representation of what occurred. Interview locations, at times, we're able to do interviews over the phone, but if we're gonna need to maybe have some documents signed, we just look for a place that is private, that can make the employee feel comfortable to discuss. We have had to ask employers to allow us to use their facilities because that makes it a lot easier, especially when there's multiple people involved that we have to be interviewing. At times, the individual does allow us to meet them at home, and we can do that, or they can also come to our office if they're able to. Okay, so as I mentioned, one of the things about conducting interviews, right, or getting each different person's vantage point of what happened, there are conflicting stories. So some of the tools that we have to be able to kind of verify what is the more likely scenario, what is it that happened, right, is purchase records and invoices from the dealers. Also, there might be the need for training records for growers that have employees, so we want to be able to verify those. There's also maybe medical evaluations that they've had to do to apply certain types of pesticides. We're going to be looking into that. Application-specific information. That's one of the records that's required to be kept when a grower has employees. We want to be able to maybe check back to see, if we can get clarification. A lot of the times people will tell us, well, I don't know what was sprayed. Pesticide use records, that's another one that we look for. Recommendations from your PCAs. Photographs of containers. So that was one that Claudia had an investigation, and during the initial part of the investigation, she started doing an inspection, and from that inspection, there was a lot of different things that kind of opened up, a lot of different questions that occurred in our mind, and so, as we were kind of trying to pin things together, one of the things that really, made it so that we could figure out when that specific purchase, and it was paraquat. It was a paraquat container. She took a picture of it. She had the barcode, the lot number on it. That was a unique code. And so we were able to verify with the dealer when they received that lot code, and then we were able to find a match for an invoice. So, a lot of the times these are things that we don't see right away, but, this is part of the evidence that we are collecting as we're finding out things. And videos. Okay, so here's one. Particularly, I want to say that some of the cases that I see, I get a lot of growers telling me, well, I told my employee, and we always stay, so much rows behind before, turning, and we turn off. Particularly, this is related to a spray, a air blast sprayer. So I say, but have you seen them do it? And so the video, recently we had a case where, a grower was telling us, this is my policy, this is what I train my employees to do. And then the complainant had provided us a video that showed something completely different, and it's okay, everybody can make a mistake. We're not flawless. We all have sometimes our faults, inattention. There's a lot of things that you're maybe thinking about when you're doing the application. It's going to happen, right? But something to think about is, going out there and actually making sure you're reiterating that the entire time. Hey, I know that we have to get this job done, but should you notice that maybe the wind starts to pick up, maybe give me a call, take out your anemometer, get some facts, right? What is the wind really like? And then maybe if it's above this, stop. Having that, extra direction, extra reiteration of what is important to you to mitigate risk. because we are seeing a big trend with, like getting videos because people are recording these things, and it comes to a surprise to people. Another video that I can think of, person driving down on a road that's, kind of a busy road at the time, and, he's trying to make his way home, and we see air blast kind of like not shutting off completely and the mist coming towards the windshield, right? So, and I hear that a lot. Like, I ask my employees to shut off, or I always shut off so far back, right? But are they really doing it? And if they're not, it's time to have a good conversation about what is important to you, to be thinking about how it looks like to somebody else when they're driving on that road. Like I said, I kind of review everything. If I see that something's missing, I'll send the report back and gather to collect more data, and sometimes that delays it. I know a lot of people are like, sometimes we call people like a few months later because once I reviewed it, I realized we were missing a piece of information. But we would just want to make sure that we have a complete report to be fair to all parties involved. And once all interviews have been conducted, any medical reports are collected, and samples have been analyzed, and that we have the results, we review everything, and they turn in an official investigative report to me. This report states the facts that have been discovered and contain all the relevant evidence. And then we basically close the investigation, and if enforcement is needed, then we move forward with that. We have a discussion with Linda about what we're thinking we're going to do, and then she makes a determination. We submit also the report to DPR. Once that report is finalized, depending on the type of enforcement that is going to occur, we may be able to release it. Sometimes we get public records requests for specific reports. And so once we have finalized it, we redact private information, and then someone can request it, and then we can provide it accordingly. I was going to have a video, but in the interest of time, because I want to make sure that I also talk about how we're going to do the certificates this year. This was a video of an incident that occurred in Tulare County where it was about 30 to 50 field workers that were exposed, and hazmat came. It sounds like the grower maybe could have used a little bit more diligence in like having observed a certain amount of distance to stay away from them. And they all had to be decontaminated, and so it was a big thing. And just wanted to say, in Stanislaus County, we actually have a very high number of like family-owned farms. So, I think, I know you guys are all working hard, and you guys maybe have this legacy of your families having owned this farm, or a legacy that you're wanting to start for yourself. So it's very important that, that you consider. Unfortunately, sometimes when people just see this stuff, that's the only side of the story that they have to relate back to agriculture. So think about, how do we prevent things? How can I maybe change something that's gonna be potentially keeping everyone in my company safe, all of my neighbors happy with me, and also, not having to deal with, all this, negative media, because that's just something that I think about, at the end of the day, I think we're very privileged in this county having a high percentage of family-owned farms, and we want to make sure that we take pride in that. Okay, have a couple of scenarios to share. And these are actually some that Claudia was the investigator. In one case, a grower made a herbicide application in short sleeves around the perimeter of their home. Later that night, they became ill and had their spouse drive them to the hospital. The grower had to tell the doctor it was pesticide related, and the doctor had to report it to the state, which got turned in to us for investigation. So it was a grower himself. It wasn't even like an employee, but at some point, he decided he was feeling sick enough, so he actually went to seek medical help. Okay, scenario number 2. An employee was applying chemicals to an orchard and did not shut off at the ends of the road. The orchard backs up into a housing development. A person was watering plants near the pool and got drifted on when the employee drove around the end of the rows. So, a couple of scenarios to ponder on. And how do you prevent this from happening to you? request a compliance inspection from one of our staff. So if you don't currently have any violations that you're that you're hashing out through, we can actually start from scratch and just really dedicate some time to do a full inspection with you. If there's anything that maybe needs a little bit of work, that's fine. We'll just let you know what tools are available. We'll just evaluate what you may need help with, and then we'll come back in about a month and just do an actual inspection. Another thing, make sure that you're training your employees on handling pesticides properly, checking the site for possible hazards, checking your equipment and pressures on your nozzles before starting the application, or assigning someone to do that accordingly that is capable of doing that, and ensuring that you're checking the weather conditions that day. And also, if you're not going to be able to be in person, you're just directly maybe available over the phone and nearby, letting them know to notify you if they observe something that maybe, may warrant them to stop and reconsider applying. Again, supervising and monitoring employees and applications is important. Sometimes, I know that it's impossible to be there every single time, but doing a random inspection and letting them know that this is important to you and to your business. Doing tailgate meetings or having pre-application inspection sheets that the applicator goes over before starting the application. Recently, someone told me, I have a site, it's so far, but I'm available over the phone, but how can I make sure that they're doing what they're doing? So we have these checklists. There might still be some on one of our tables, and if not, we have them available also on the web, and it just kind of goes through everything. And so, making sure that either you're checking it for them or that they're checking it themselves before starting may help prevent some unfortunate situation. Very important. Maintain good relationships with your neighbors. We have seen a high increase, and this is not only applicable to people that are maybe in the ag, urban, transitional areas. This is actually happening in just areas that are really zoned for ag. Just making sure that, that you get to know them, and that if they have any concerns, you guys are able to mitigate them together. A lot of the times it's very easy to kind of get those things resolved. And I think that that's very important. Always remember, if an employee falls ill during work hours and they've been working around pesticides recently, take them to the hospital, even if you're not sure if it has anything to do with chemicals, because there might just be the possibility that it is chemically related, and it may get worse. So it's better to prevent. Okay, poll question number 5. What can you do to prevent an investigation or complaint from happening? A, request a compliance inspection with your district agricultural inspector. B, supervise and monitor applications when being made by your employees. C, reinforce and retrain your employees on how to evaluate a site prior to making an application and on a safe and effective manner using pesticides. Or D, all of the above? Hands. Okay, we have a gentleman.
All the above.
D, all of the above. And I bet that there's like about another 10 or 15 different things that we can think of, right? And it's better to think of them ahead of time. So here's a graph showing the different types of investigations that we closed. This is a little bit outdated. It's from 2023. 19% were for human health effects. 22% just general complaints that really led to no violations. 2% property loss, 2% environmental effects, 18% other, and 37 of these are counted as what we consider inspection consolidations, and that is when an inspection is conducted and there's violations and we have to follow up accordingly. Okay, here's another thing I wanted to talk about. Total number of investigations over the years. Main point I want to make is in 2017, our total number of investigations was 75. In 2018, it was 70, okay? And it's been creeping up. As of 2022, that doubled to 141. Okay, so we're getting a lot more visibility. We know a lot of people have shown that they are now more concerned with pesticides and how pesticides affect them. And so something to think about that. In 5 years, we are basically having to do twice as many investigations than we used to do before. So be aware of that, and that, you know, again, I go back to, like, a lot of people have more concerns, and these may be your neighbors, right? This may be a grower that is adjacent to you. Just be aware and be proactive. Okay, and with that said, we have ended this presentation.